generations. And now, the power of two restores the one.
We got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back to the video. In this week's Shoot the Sheev, we're sharing some of our passion with all of you. Of course, we love Star Wars, but there's also something that we also love quite a bit, and that is board games. And I think we've talked about a handful of board games in the past, but today we're going to talk about three of the most recent ones that we've gotten our hands on. Tell you a little bit about each of those games, maybe some of the basics of how it works, and then, some of our favorite things about it, some memories. And I know there's a couple of small things that I like to point out that I'm a little nerdy about with these games. So the three games we are going to be talking about in today's podcast is we're going to be talking about the new Star Wars deck building game from Fantasy Flight Games. We are also going to talk about the latest Star Wars Villainous expansion. If you don't know what Villainous is, you're missing out, that's for sure. But basically, there was a base set that came out a little while ago, and then we had our first expansion with Boba Fett as the lead character. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the latest Clone Wars board game. That's literally what it's called. It's probably the most involved of all the ones that we have. So we'll save that one for last. So I think we want to kick off this first segment with the deck building game. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of background, if you don't know what a deck building game is, a deck building game is basically you start off with a handful of cards in your deck, and then as you play the game, you are building a bigger deck to have more cards at your disposal with different effects and whatnot, so that you can use them, later on as you are playing. There's tons of deck builders we've played in the past that we love. But this one, I guess, to talk about what are you expecting to do, is each player has a set of planets or bases, as they call them, and basically you're trying to take out the other person's bases. The first one to take out the other person's bases, all of them, wins. And the way that the whole deck building part comes into play is both teams start off with a small deck. It's pretty interesting because the two decks are actually the same exact deck. They just have different cosmetics. So I think that's kind of funny. Like the effects and everything are the same for both when you start. And then as you're playing, there is a currency in the game, which helps you buy more cards. In the middle of the play area, I like to call it the river because that's like Texas Hold'em and stuff. There's a whole bunch of different cards where, there's Empire and Rebels for the two people that are playing. There's also gray cards, which are just kind of that middle ground, so any player can use them. But basically, if you're the Rebels, you're trying to purchase Rebel cards, and if you're the Empire, you're trying to purchase Empire cards. And then again, those gray cards come into play as well. Some examples of the gray cards could be like bounty hunters. They work for money. They don't work necessarily for just the bad guys. They do work for the good guys too. So you can have that option as well. So yeah, as you're, purchasing cards, you can go through and your deck builds. And then as your turns come through, your job is to, play your cards, use the abilities to, if you're trying to get more currencies, you can buy cards, you can do that. If you're trying to go on the offensive and you're trying to take out the enemy's base, you can do that. There's a whole wide variety of things. I feel like I'm taking up all of it. Sarah, is there some stuff you want to say about the game?
One of the neat things that I like about the game is that there's a force tracker.
Yep.
So you can turned towards the dark side someone is, or who the force is leaning towards, like either the dark side or the light side. And that can give you different effects for some of your cards. Sometimes you'll get a bonus if it's closer to your side or not. There's lots of ships that you can use to help defend your base. So it's not just character cards, there's also ship cards. Yeah, I used to not be a super deck building kind of person just because I prefer more like miniature style gaming, like where there's an actual board versus just cards. But this one I thought was pretty neat, and it's very involved. It's not just I'm not trying to downplay other card builders, but there's so many different things to keep track of, and there's a lot more strategy in it, at least in my eyes. So I thought that part of it was neat.
Yeah, you definitely have to it's kind of like chess, where you have to think a couple of turns ahead, kind of a thing. You can see what cards that your opponent is purchasing, so you kind of know what's coming at some points. You have to be prepared for that. Sarah mentioned that there's some ship cards, so there's cards that are, like TIE fighters and X-wings, and those kind of play like your normal cards, just kind of like your heroes as well. But there's also like flagship cards, which end up being defenses for your bases. So like, let's say someone's trying to attack a base, they have to, plow through those capital ships before they can get to the base. So that's kind of a cool way to have a defense mechanic for your base. The other thing is, so I had mentioned that you can, purchase cards from the river, so to speak, and then build your deck. But you can also do some things where you, so let's say I'm playing the Empire and Sarah's playing the Rebels. If I see a Rebel card that's coming up and I'm like, I don't want Sarah to be able to purchase that, you can actually attack cards that are in the river as well. And then, prevent your opponent from getting those cards. And a good chunk of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, there's also rewards for doing that too. So you gain things from taking out those cards, which, they could be force points, which goes towards that tracker that Sarah was talking about. It could be a currency, whole bunch of different things. I will say, when we think about Star Wars, this follows the original trilogy, so 4, 5, and 6. And, Sarah being the Rebels, me being the Empire, if you see the big characters come up, like Luke, Leia, Vader, or the Emperor, or something like that, those dudes are big trouble if your opponent gets those cards. I just remember, I think Sarah had gotten like Luke and Leia together at some point, and they just wreck. Especially, I mean, they're crazy on their own, but they're even worse when they're together. So
Think you mean even better?
I don't know about that. But yeah, if your opponent gets some of those big name cards, watch out. They are harder to take. So I should also preface with this: they are the most expensive cards to get from the river. I can say that. And then also they are the hardest ones to take out as well. So like if you're attacking things that are in that river, they take more hit points to take them out. You get bigger rewards too, of course. But they're not just like, oh, it's hard, it's expensive for me to purchase, easy for them to take out. No, it goes both ways. So yeah, it's very interesting to see what kind of strategy can come out of the game. I don't know about you, Sarah, but me, I tried to go for like capital ships right away. That way I can, have more shields on my base. Because there's even cards that, and I think there's even a base card or two that does this, because each of the bases has their own effects that help you out. Some of them even allow you to heal like some of your flagships. So even though they're taking damage from the opponent, there's sometimes where you can get rid of that damage, and it makes it even harder for the opponent to do things. I'm pretty sure, because this is the one that always bugged me, is that in the Rebel side, there is a base for Hoth. Pretty sure it's Hoth that does this. And whenever so if I'm the Empire and I'm attacking that base, and let's say my attack is 5, it always has a -1 from every attacker. So that's basically like, if you think about it, an extra health that planet gets every attack. And so if you don't have very many attackers at one point, or if you have a whole bunch of attackers but they have small attack, I mean, that all factors into that strategy of, man, can't really get rid of that planet as fast as I want to.
One of my favorite memories, because I think it's fun with this game when we were first starting out and trying to learn how to play and whatnot. I think I played as the Rebels and you played as the Empire. And I'm pretty sure I won the first 2 rounds. And so then we swapped and you were playing as the Rebels and I was playing in the Empire. And then I think you won like the next 1 or 2 rounds. So I thought to myself, kind of like Fez from that 70s show, if you've seen that, where he's learning how to play rock, paper, scissors. And he thinks like, oh, well, the rock wins every time, or oh, the scissors wins every time. So then they flip-flop. And he just keeps thinking like, getting confused on how it actually wins, like thinking the system's rigged, because it was so difficult for us to learn how to win from both angles. Like you get so used to playing as one side that when you go to flip to the other side, it's like a whole new game almost, just because you're trying to learn all these different rules and these different things to your advantage that you might not have been aware of before. And it's just a funny, cute moment of like, oh, well, the Rebels always win. So then I'd play as the Rebels and then I'd lose like the next turn because you had figured out how to make the Empire win.
Yeah, I remember that. That happens a lot with our games. I was going to say something else too. So Sarah just kind of mentioned, there's a lot of different cards. There's a lot of different things to keep track of. It's not as overwhelming as it sounds. Especially if you're playing with somebody else that's new to the game, because you're both kind of, seeing cards for the first time and learning, I'm going to try this one, I'm going to try that one, and just kind of see how things go. I like it. I think it's a very, it's hard to say games are easy because, it depends on the type of player, if they're into games or not.
I feel like this one wasn't that hard to pick up though, in terms of, learning the rules. It's a very simple base set of rules with just a lot of variations of the same card, if you will, like a hero attacker or whoever. There might be 6 different ones, but they all kind of work the same. So if you know how an attack works, you know how each of those 6 cards work. So it might look kind of intimidating, but I think part of it too is just that it's a little bit difficult to describe a game without it seeming complicated until you actually get into it. Even when I watch video tutorials for various games, sometimes it can just be an overwhelming amount of information. But once you actually start playing, you're like, oh, this isn't so bad.
Right. And it's even easier if you're playing with somebody that has played it already, because then you're able to get like a quick response for all your questions. I will say, because this is kind of the nerdiness in me, so Sarah and I, when it was a thing, it's no longer in production, but we played the game Star Wars Destiny, which was a trading card game by Fantasy Flight, the same company that made this game, and was it Star Wars Destiny? Maybe it was. No, it might be Imperial Assault. It's one of the 2 games. But basically, what happened, and I noticed this because
are you thinking about the deck builder with the dice?
The trading card game with the dice. That's
Okay.
Star Wars Destiny. I didn't know if that was also by Fantasy Flight, but what I'm about to say, I'm pretty sure it's Imperial Assault that I was thinking of. Because
it is Fantasy Flight.
Gotcha. So we also have Imperial Assault, which is like a very big and involved Star Wars board game. It's one of those board games that's like $100, so that tells you how complicated it is. But if you look at the artwork from Imperial Assault for the characters, and then you look at the artwork for this deck builder game, a lot of them are the exact same artwork. So like if you look at Han Solo's artwork for like if you were to purchase him for Imperial Assault, the figure, the artwork for Han Solo there is the same picture that is used for Han Solo's card in this deck builder game. So it's kind of interesting to see kind of a little bit of laziness when it comes to the artwork of the game. That part I'm a
Talking
little
about Destiny or Imperial Assault?
I'm pretty sure it's Imperial Assault. Because the Han Solo for that one is he's like this kind of like looking off to the side. And I'm pretty sure that's the same picture for the deck builder game. The same thing with Luke. Like his picture from the Imperial Assault packaging is the same thing as the picture for Luke in the deck builder game.
That is also Fantasy Flight. I didn't realize they made so many of these games.
Yeah, I have not checked to see if they're the same pictures for Destiny, but if they are, that is super lazy. I don't think that they are, but I can't confirm it. So that was like one of the small things that I noticed because we had gotten this deck builder game right around the time that we had gotten Imperial Assault. And me, I'm one of those people that goes a little overboard when they get into something, then they have to have all the other ones too. And so like I think I got Imperial Assault, I think for Christmas, and then I put like a whole bunch of the figure things on my list, and then that's what people bought me for Christmas. And so I had a whole bunch of them. And then when we go to play this game, which I think I got for Christmas as well, maybe, seeing those pictures side by side, I was like, oh my goodness, this is kind of crazy, but it's whatever. Both games are very fun. I just, artwork is important too with games. It's very important. You want it to look appealing. You don't want it to appear lazy.
I would say it's nice artwork though, because we've seen some of the newer puzzles of Star Wars, and granted, a lot of them look very nice, but there's some of them that are really strange cartoon art style that's just not in my taste. And I think if somebody were to make a board game or a deck builder and that art style, ooh, would be a big mistake.
I'm kind of curious to know what your thoughts are. So, if you followed us here on YouTube, you know that we are big into the new Lorcana game that came out for Disney. Super hard to get that stuff. Still haven't gotten any since our first couple videos. But there's also a new Star Wars trading card game that's coming out. I forget what company, but the artwork on those is a little bit more. I would say they look more like graphic novels. What's that?
I was asking if it was comic book style, and then you said graphic novels.
Yeah, I would make that distinction a little closer because I wouldn't just say animated because that I think gives the idea maybe they look like Cartoon Network or Pixar or something like that. They don't. But I'm curious to see what you think about that artwork. So maybe I'll show you sometime. I think that game comes out early next year. And I'm very curious to see if it ends up being like Lorcana where it's hard to get, or if it's just because Star Wars trading card games, in my opinion, just like Destiny, how that didn't survive, it makes me wonder if this one will too. But we'll have to find out. Maybe we'll check it out sometime. Is there anything else that you want to talk about for the deck building game?
It's a max of 2 players, right?
Correct.
Yeah, 2 players, head to head, approximately 30 minutes of gameplay. At least that's what it says in the box, and I would say that's fairly accurate. Maybe not your first go around as you're learning how to play, but probably your second or third game. You're right at about that 30-minute mark, which is a nice kind of turn and burn style card game.
Yeah. The one thing that I am hopeful for is an expansion or a second version or something like that, because I think this game was really cool. If they could do an expansion where they bring in a different era, maybe the Clone Wars, my guess is Star Wars or Disney would bring out the sequel trilogy. Not too sure how well that would sell, but I would still be there one of the first days to go pick it up just because I enjoy this game so much. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the second game on our list, which is the Star Wars Villainous expansion pack featuring Boba Fett. So stick around. Do you enjoy taking a look at Black Series figure collections? Well, then we have a playlist for you. We take a look at all the newest Star Wars Black Series figures that we can get our hands on and share them with you. So if you enjoy those types of videos, make sure to check out our playlist that goes over the Star Wars Black Series figures in our collection, and you will not be disappointed. So check those out. Now back to our regularly scheduled program. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to talk about our second game on our list for today. We are talking about the latest expansion to Star Wars Villainous, which is the Boba Fett edition. Sarah, I think you have the game right there in front of you. What is it actually called? It's like the tagline on the bottom of the box.
Scum and Villainy.
Okay, that makes sense. So give you a little bit of background, just because this is an expansion. So we should tell you a little bit about what the game is in general. Villainous in general started as Disney, then it came out with a Marvel edition, and now we're here with a Star Wars edition. There's tons of expansions for Disney, there's a handful for Marvel, and this is the first one for Star Wars. And so each of them have the same idea for what you're trying to do, but they all have kind of their own different mechanics too that make them different. To expand on that a little bit, Disney, the original game, is a little more grounded in a way where you are doing more of your own stuff, because you play as a villain and your job is to carry out your objective that's on your board before anybody else. And then while you're playing and trying to, do your evil plan, your opponents, they're trying to do their evil plan, plus they can basically summon heroes into your realm to try to mess with your realm. So that's pretty much what the Disney one is like. There's not a whole lot of, at least not yet, of being able to meddle with your own deck into other players' realms, which is what happens with Marvel. So Marvel's big thing is that there's a handful of different villains where they can interact with other people's stuff. Haven't tried them a whole lot, just because that kind of scares us a little bit, to be honest. We still have to learn that mechanic, but that's the mechanic that kind of separates Marvel from Disney. That way there's something to spice it up. So for example, I believe one of the expansions had Kang the Conqueror, and if you know about Kang the Conqueror, he has like a whole bunch of different Kangs that go to different realms and then try to conquer. Well, that's kind of what your goal is with that character, is to invade other people's stuff and then take over the game.
Part of why we haven't gotten super into the Marvel ones either is just that we aren't as familiar with the Marvel realm as we are with the Disney and Star Wars realms. And do you need to know everything about your character when you play as any specific villain? The answer is no. But does it help you maybe grasp the concept of what they're trying to do, or what their objective is? I would say it helps, even just to have a basic understanding of who the character is before you play as them. Just because then you kind of have a base knowledge to go off of, and you're not just having to fly blind learning the character and the gameplay at the same time.
Yeah. So kind of like, I'm trying to remember one off the top of my head. I think the Maleficent one, you have to get like thorns in a bunch of different different parts of your board, because you get like 4 main areas for where those characters are at in the movies. And then I'm pretty sure she has to get like thorns in a handful of them and then take out Prince Eric. And then maybe have Aurora sleeping. I don't remember that part. But I do remember the thorn thing going on. And then there was also
if you think of Captain Hook, he has to defeat Peter Pan, on his, I think it's on his boat or in the sea or something like that. There's a specific location on your board you have to defeat Peter Pan, but there's a couple things you have to get to that.
Right. So there's a bit of a process to actually get to some of those end goals. So where we're at with Star Wars, the big thing that Star Wars added was a ship. So like you normally have your 4 areas that you can bounce between. Well, if you have a ship, you can have a 5th place that you can bounce between, which is kind of nice. And I think you can have 2 ships at a time, which is kind of cool. So where does this expansion fit in? Well, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to talk about, who is in the expansion, because it's not just Boba Fett. Villainous does do a handful of one-off scenarios. Their most recent one is the Disney Villainous for Oogie Boogie. Haven't played that one yet, but it is pretty cool because you do get a pair of his dice to use during his game. And then Marvel also had one with Venom. But the more common expansion is to have 3 people involved. So Sarah, what are the 3 that come in this expansion and what are their objectives?
Yeah, so just to clarify, when he says 3 people involved, you don't have to have 3 players. It's 3 new characters that you can play as. And so for this one, it's Boba Fett, the 7th sister, not the 6th, but the 7th, and then Cad Bane. Did you want me to go over there?
Supposed to do?
Okay. I wasn't sure if we were going over objectives or not, or just character lists. So Boba Fett, he has to complete 4 bounties to maintain his place as the Galactic Empire's greatest bounty hunter. So that one added a new level of gameplay of having to find bounty hunters, obtain bounties from them, and then actually accomplish those bounties in order to defeat, or not defeat, but win your realm if you're playing as Boba Fett. The 7th sister, her goal is that she must remove the 3 rebel heroes, being Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, and Ezra Bridger, from the game. So for that one, you have to go through your fate deck somehow, one way or another, to find those 3 heroes and then defeat them in battle. So sometimes with these ones, it can be kind of difficult to get those fate cards, because if the other players in the room know that you are trying to find fate cards in order to win, it's kind of a double-edged sword for them, because they want to do fate because it can wreck your game, but they don't want to do fate because in this case it can help your game, because you're looking for those heroes in order to defeat them to win your game, which is kind of a little bit backwards from some of the typical gameplay for this game.
Just in case we haven't made the connection yet, for the viewers, because I didn't call it a fate deck. Fate deck is when you're trying to mess with somebody else's realm. So when Sarah says you're actually performing like a fate action, that's when you're sending in those heroes to try to stop them or delay them a little bit in their plans.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So typically with a character like that, where you're trying to find those hero cards, there are things in your villain deck that can help you bring those heroes out in order to attack them. But it means you're going to have to turn and burn through a lot of cards sometimes to be able to find them, which can be kind of bittersweet, because when I have cards I really like, I don't always want to let go of them. But if you're looking for certain cards, you kind of have to discard your whole hand at times. So it kind of makes you really torn on what to do and how to accomplish your game, because each of these characters, they're all totally different, and they're all the same at the same time. I don't know, I feel like I'm kind of going in circles a little bit with some of these, but sorry, it's a really fun game. But anyway, Cad Bane, so he must collect 5 target tokens by defeating heroes that have targets placed on them by his allies. So Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong.
I was just going to say I played him, so I can explain it if you want.
Go for it.
So Cad Bane's is kind of interesting. So when you're playing villainous, you normally have like minions or allies that can help you take out, they call it vanquish in the game, the heroes that are disrupting your realm. And so what Cad Bane does is he can't just straight up vanquish somebody. What happens is Cad Bane has his minions basically, quote unquote, collect these bounties or make him aware of them. And so, like, you'll use his allies to vanquish the heroes, and then they get a target token. And then the target token is if you have a card in your hand that says, you know, Cad Bane can take out somebody with that target token, that's how he actually kills them. And then you can collect that target token as, you know, counting towards the amount that you need to do. So it's interesting from his perspective because, like I said, normally you're just using your allies to take people out. They clear the board, or like I think Vader in the original game has a thing where he has to like turn Luke to the dark side and defeat him or something like that. And so you're like, once you take him out, you're done. But not with Cad Bane. Cad Bane, you have to take him out with one of the allies or minions, and then you have to use a card where Cad Bane essentially gets the final kill shot on whoever it is that he's trying to take out. So it kind of reminds me of like the allies might be like, quote unquote, pinning down the person, and then Cad Bane walks up and pops them, kind of a thing.
The way I was kind of envisioning it is like they put a tracker on whoever they're trying to attack, and then Cad Bane tracked them down with the tracker.
Probably a more clean version of what I said. But yeah, I mean, I played Cad Bane's character. I did like it. I enjoyed it. I didn't think he was too complicated. I do think in this specific expansion, Boba Fett was probably the most tricky because of the whole bounty system. Because you could use bounties as working for you, or they could work against you. And it was like really, really, you really had to think about what you were doing with those cards. Because if you don't, like Sarah said, you know, if you, let's say you misused a card and you really could have used that to be part of the bounty, well, then you have to, you know, burn through your cards again to get to that card again in your deck, because it would, you know, your discards go back in your deck, shuffle, and you get more cards later. Well, that takes a lot of time. And honestly, you do and you don't have a lot of time to complete your stuff, because, you know, people are watching you. They're watching what you're doing. You know, it's part of the beginning of the game to at least announce what your objective is, not necessarily how you're going to go about it. And so, you know, if someone sees that, you know, you're getting close to, you know, if they see Cad Bane has a target token on somebody, they're like, oh, you know, they're getting closer to being finished. So then they're going to start trying to disrupt that with some of those other fate cards. So I think that's a good solid expansion. I'm looking forward to whatever ends up being the next one. But there's some really good ones in the base set too, because Star Wars, like I said, it has the base set, and this is the first expansion. Whereas Disney has a whole bunch of stuff. Like there's probably, I don't know, a good 15 characters you can pick from if you're doing the Disney version.
Yeah. So this game says it's 2 to 4 players. I would challenge that a little bit because we typically play with either just the two of us, or we have a game group that we play with sometimes, and that's a group of 5. Can it be a little overwhelming with 5? I suppose, but I think a lot of that's just because we're constantly characters, which means we're having to relearn the game every time we play. Whereas, you know, when it's just the two of us, sometimes we'll retry the same characters over and over to try to like master them a little bit. And then it says 20 minutes per player for game time, which makes sense if you think about it, because you're taking turns as you play, and because everybody has their own objectives, it's not a race unlike the game of life per se, where there's just one board and you're all on the same track. everybody's got different things that they're trying to do, and the more people there are, the more people can kind of mess with each other because if there's just me and Jeremy playing, well, he's the only one that can play with my Fate deck. Playing with, say, 3 other people, well, we can all take turns hitting each other's Fate deck and making each other's games even harder. So the more people you have, the longer the game is going to take for this. So they say 20 minutes per player. I would say that's fairly accurate. So for 2 people, maybe a 40-minute game. Would you say that that's roughly what it is?
Probably. I feel like it might be a little less if you know what you're doing very well. Kind of like you said, how we try to master some of those characters. If you've used some characters more than once and you kind of have a feel for what you're doing, I can see it being a little bit faster. But when you're playing with, if you're playing, so like when we bought this expansion, right? And then we went to go play with some friends. Well, those 3 characters were new to 3 people. And so when you're new to these characters, it takes some time, you know, to understand what you're doing. I will say, because I don't think we've touched on this, each character does come with a booklet that kind of tells you like, hey, this is your objective. Here's some of the cards in your deck. Here's some of the things you may want to try in order to accomplish your goal, you know, while you're playing the game. So, you know, you can do that and then, you know, try to see what you got to do. But I do think, you know,
I think that's where it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, you read it, you kind of take it for what it's worth, but it really takes actually, you know, getting in the game, seeing the cards in front of you, and then, you know, connecting the dots between your cards and your objective and seeing how things are supposed to play out. That's where you really start to, you know, pick up on things.
Yeah. So thinking back to Seventh Sister, she was one of the new ones from this set. Jeremy's sister actually played as her when we played this game last time, and she's not familiar with this character. Like she's watched Star Wars and whatnot, but Seventh Sister is someone from the Rebels TV show. Is she in Clone Wars too?
I don't remember.
Okay. I have not seen all of Clone Wars. I've just started watching that series. So if she is in there, I apologize. I don't know because I haven't seen it all. But anyway, so our sister had not seen Rebels, so she doesn't know this character, which is fine because you don't have to know the background of them. But then when you read the objective of defeating 3 heroes, being Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra, you can kind of take it for what it's worth, you know, of, okay, I have to find these 3 characters that are all named this and take them out from the game. And that's fine. But if you've seen, say, the Rebels TV show or you know who this character is, it kind of makes a bit more sense. And I think it gives you a bit more appreciation for the actual character and the storyline of what you're trying to do or what your objective is. So that's kind of where, you know, do you have to know the background of the character you're playing? No. But does it enhance the gameplay and make it a little bit more fun or interesting? I would say so.
I would also say sometimes it gives the opposite effect too. Well, kind of opposite. So like this isn't the Star Wars one, but with some of the Disney expansions when that game came out, there was a couple of the villains where I really hadn't seen their movies or read any books or known anything about them. And so by playing the game, I was like, this guy's pretty cool. I wonder what his movie's like. And then I would go and watch the movie. The dude from the Black Cauldron is in one of them, and so is the rat from the Great Mouse Detective. He's another one too. And so those are just 2 characters that come to mind right away where I hadn't seen those films. So it helped introduce me to some cool new villain characters. But I would say, you know, if you're trying to get into villainous, like Sarah said, find the ones that have the characters that you like. Because that's going to be the easier way for you to get into the game. You know, if you already kind of know who the character is and you kind of already know kind of what that objective means, because all their objectives do actually correlate to the characters and what they do in the films. So if you kind of have that idea, then you can go ahead and, you know, try to plan out your cards in a way to, you know, mimic that a little bit. And then once you do that a time or two, you start to pick up on how the game works. And then you can go to other ones that maybe you're less familiar with, and then check those out as well. Another cool one, again, not Disney or not Star Wars, but Syndrome from Pixar. His was pretty cool because you had to you know, bring out different models of that robot thing that he had. You had to, you know, destroy the first couple and then unleash the one on the city like the end of the movie. And then you actually had to succeed in Syndrome's plan all along, where he defeats, you know, this big thing, this big robot, and is seen as the hero of the city, you know, because that's what his plan was all along. So that's another one that's like really good with translating what was on the screen into the game.
What would you say is your favorite Star Wars villain to play as so far with Villainous?
Oh, geez. I remember the three that you said. I'm going to quick look at what comes in the...
While you're pulling that list up, I'll go ahead and say mine. I think mine's going to be General Grievous. I almost feel like his is a little easy, just because the rules aren't as complicated for him. But essentially what he's doing is he's trying to collect lightsabers, right? And I think it's once you have 8 lightsabers, you've won your objective. Well, how do you get a Jedi lightsaber? You got to defeat a Jedi, right? So it's a very simple gameplay for him of just finding the Jedi, defeating them, and stealing their lightsabers. I don't know. I think it's kind of neat to see a collection. I like collecting things. So you get to collect all these lightsabers, and they're just little cardboard tokens. But
would you say your lightsabers will make a fine addition to my collection?
I definitely would.
So I'm gonna go on and say one that people will probably be like, oh, you pick him, just because there is that bad stigma about the sequel trilogy. I'm gonna go with Kylo Ren. So his objective is basically to full-fledged become part of the dark side, because we know from the sequel trilogy, you know, he's kind of back and forth quite a bit. And so his objective, you know, I think he has like that force meter where you need to, I think you have to get all the tokens to the dark side, and I think that's how you win. I don't remember 100%, but that's kind of like how he becomes fully part of the dark side. And I think there's different things in there, like different cards that will get you different points for that. But yeah, I liked Kylo Ren. I also remember when we were first trying out the Star Wars edition, that was the one that seemed to be the hardest for us to win with, and I liked that challenge. I liked you know, being Kylo Ren and trying to, you know, figure out this game and be really good at the harder one. So the last thing I'm going to say about the Villainous games, and this goes for all of them, not just Star Wars, but the Star Wars ones are super neat too. The figures are phenomenal. The miniatures are the coolest. Like they put thought into them, and they're very high quality. And if you go to Target, one of our favorite stores, this is not a sponsored video, we just love it. If you go to Target for these things, they have exclusive versions of the miniatures. So check those out as well. The cool thing for the Star Wars ones, they all, for the origin, like the base game, they all had lightsabers or the dark saber for Moff Gideon, and all of their characters had that, like the hilt as the piece that they stand on, and then it's them on top of it. And it was really super cool. Check out the game if you're wondering what I'm talking about. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the last game on our list, which is probably the most complicated, but definitely a very fun game. So stick around. Have you ever wondered what it's like to grow up during the prequel era? Do you wonder what type of merchandise was around then? How different was it than it is now? Check out our videos on this channel where we talk about the merchandise of the Phantom Menace and the merchandise of Attack of the Clones. They are here on this channel. The Phantom Menace is my first video ever on YouTube, so there's a special place in my heart for that one, so please, if any, check that out. Now back to our show. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to talk about our final game on our list today of all the different fun Star Wars board games that have come out somewhat recently that we've really enjoyed. And then our final one that we're talking about today is the newest Star Wars, the Clone Wars board game. Honestly, this one has been out a little bit as far as, when it was released, but we recently, started playing it. I'll give a little bit of background on it, and then Sarah's going to talk about what this game is all about. If you look at the game and when I say that, I mean look at the box. The game is made by the same people that made the game called Pandemic. And so one of my small issues with the game is that when you're reading the rules and stuff, or even when you're listening to people try to explain it on YouTube, there's always this, if you've played Pandemic, it works like this. And then it's like, well, I haven't played Pandemic, so I don't know. So I can just get that out of the way. If you've played Pandemic, then this game will probably be very easy to pick up. If you haven't played Pandemic, Sarah, you're up.
Yeah, so I was just confirming if it was actually made by the same company or not, and it is, just because I didn't know if it was a licensed thing. So yeah, we had never played Pandemic before. It's just hadn't really ever tried it. Nothing against it. But we saw a Star Wars miniatures game of the Clone Wars, which is not something you really see a whole lot as, Clone Wars board games and whatnot. So we're like, this looks pretty cool. Especially the cover of it, because it's got a handful of Jedi on there, but it's also got a giant picture of Darth Maul and Count Dooku on the front, and it's their side profile, and it just looks really intriguing to me.
I also want to say what was also super intriguing was when you look on the back and you look at the contents list. Mind you, this box, it's a decent size, but it's not humongous. But it does say on the back that it comes with 50 plastic miniatures. So there's a ton of miniatures in this game that you actually get to use. And they're not crappy miniatures either. They're nice. I like them.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Although I will say, when I saw that, I kind of expected 50 different figures or key characters, whereas what it really is there are 7 Jedi characters for you to choose from because you play as a Jedi. There are 4 villain miniatures, 3 blockades, and then there are 36 droids. So lots of droid minifigures. However, there are a handful of different variations of them in different poses. Sometimes, one's kneeling or one's holding a gun facing the sky versus, having the gun at his hip or something. So they're not just 36 of the exact same figure. It looks like there's, I think, 5 different poses for them. So at least they're not all the same. But yeah, so you play as a Jedi. You are a team. It is, I believe it's 1 to 5 players. Let me double check. Sorry, I was looking at the bottom of the box. Yeah, 1 to 5 players. It's a 60-minute game, which is pretty lengthy. But you and your team of Jedi are working together to complete these various missions. The board itself is kind of like a sky view or a map view of all these different planets that you can go to. And there's, I don't know, 20 different planets on this board. So there's a lot of different locations. But there are droids everywhere. And the villains that you're playing against, you actually get to pick which villain cards you want to start with. They recommend starting with, I think it was Ventress.
That's who we started with.
As the starter for if you've never played before. But as you get more used to the system, you can go with some different villains to increase the difficulty level. But your goal is to get through your mission deck, however many missions you're choosing to play through. Again, another way to increase your difficulty level. I think you start with 3 missions. But these missions are, go to a certain planet. You have to have a certain number of various cards in your hand in order to defeat the Empire base, if you will. Just to kind of make it really broad without diving too deep into the rules.
The Separatist base.
Separatist base. Yes, thank you. My bad. Please don't come and attack me. Oopsie. So anyway, while you're trying to go and attack these bases, the villains are also trying to attack you. Each turn you get to do some actions, and that could be, traveling or taking out some of the droids, or maybe attempting a mission. Then the villain gets a turn, right? So they get to try and attack you or do something to kind of raise. I'm trying to think of the proper words here. Something to mess with your plans, let's say. And then you get more droids deployed every round to various planets. And the longer it takes you to accomplish your goals, the harder it gets because the more droids keep on coming. You have a hand limit, which can make it kind of tricky sometimes because you can't just keep collecting cards over and over and over and have like infinite cards at your disposal. Every time you get hit, you have to discard one of your cards unless you have a special card that can block an attack. So the stakes going to be pretty high. I would say this is a very neat way to kind of portray being a Jedi in the Clone Wars. Granted, if you've been listening to this video, I haven't really seen all of the Clone Wars, but I've seen some of it, a little bit. So from what I have seen, I think it's pretty neat, and I can envision myself being in the war against these droids. What would you say, Jeremy, in terms of, do you feel like you're part of the Clone Wars when you're playing this game? How did you like it?
I think it makes you, feel like one of the war generals, like, in the war room and seeing, the growing armies of the separatists and having to, deal with all of that. I do really like the way it all works. I don't know if I heard you say, so so how do you lose? Well, there's a counter on the side of the board. I think, what does it count up to? Do you have it right there? Is it 7 or 8?
Do. The threat level can go, it starts at 0, so no threat, right? And then it goes up to 6, and once it gets beyond 6, you lose because it made it to
Darth Sidious.
Yes.
So basically you get 7 mess ups. Well, the 7th mess up and you lose. How do you actually get mess ups? Well, when droids are being deployed, there can be 3 droid figures, and then the 4th one ends up being a blockade. And then if you can't put anything, like if you are forced to play another droid in the location that has 3 droids and a blockade, well, then that moves that threat marker. Also, there is a tracker at the top of the board where it's the invasion tracker. So it tells you how many droids are being deployed per round. And if that maxes out and then you have to move that counter again, then it also applies to that tracker and it moves it another one. So
for the threat level.
Yeah, the threat level. So there's a couple of different ways to actually, get that thing moving. So you have to keep an eye on everything. You're working together. So, I mean, you can, talk to each other and see what, you guys think. And, I think with Sarah and I, a couple of times, there was a few times where one of us went after the mission and the other one went after, the droids and containing them a little bit. And so, you just kind of pick and choose what you're doing. I think if you don't talk about it and you just do whatever you want, I think that will lead to some trouble. But I think it's a very, very cool game. And like I said, I definitely felt like, we were in that war room and, telling generals, hey, go here, go there. And, um, you know, taking out the different separatists. The cards are really nice too. I mean, we talked about the miniatures and how they were pretty cool. The cards are super nice as well. So
I
we
really
talked
like the
about,
board.
yeah, the board is phenomenal as well. Everything about this game is really nice, like the looking, especially for the price. I think when this first came out, it was like 60 or $70 when like the game that it keeps getting referred to being Pandemic. Let's see, how much was that game? I had
And
it
how
up.
many miniatures?
Oh, that's a good question.
While
So,
you're looking that up, one thing that I like about the board, not just the artwork, but it's also a giant board. Like it is not your standard 1,000 piece puzzle size game board. This is a very large game board. It's like 3 feet by 2 feet or something like that. It's huge.
so we have a little bit of not 100% one-to-one type comparisons, and what I mean by that is, so the Pandemic game regular price is $45, but the Pandemic pieces, so like with the Star Wars one, we have the miniatures that are really nice where they actually look like, Anakin, Ahsoka, and all of them. um this one just has basically like sorry pieces that you use, like that, the wooden looking versions of those, as your characters. And then as far as like the comparison to the droids, the Pandemic one are disease cubes. So they're just little black cubes. And so there's nothing special about them. There's no intricacy or details that are going into them. They're just little blocks. So it's not exactly apples to apples in that comparison. So, and also, Star Wars, they got to pay for a license. So
Well, there are other variations of the Pandemic game. I'd be curious to know, maybe not this minute, but just in general, how the game has evolved. Because one thing I was kind of thinking about is I feel like a lot of these co-op games are kind of a relatively new concept. At least for us it is. We've got this one, the Clone Wars. We've also got the Horrified board game series that we really like, where that's another co-op style game where you're all working together. And so I was thinking, like, is this a new concept? Whereas instead of going against each other, you're going against the villains, or uh, but then you think of Pandemic. Pandemic's been around for quite a while, so I'm not super surprised to hear that the base game isn't as intricate in terms of like the character models and whatnot as this format of the game.
yeah, it looks like, at least just by Googling it, it says that the Pandemic board game came out in 2018. So it's been out for about 5 years now. Um,
That's it?
that's what it says. Like I said, that's from just an initial. Okay, so maybe this is a little bit better. So I went to a different website, and I guess so the version like that we see at Target and stuff, I think that's the one that came out in 2018 or whatever. But it looks like the original came out in 2008.
Okay. Wow, I'm surprised. I thought it would have been a lot longer ago.
It sure
But
seems like it though.
I guess that's just goes to show that maybe the co-op board game system is kind of a relatively newer concept, because I don't really know of many games that are pre-2000 that would be a co-op style. Usually everything is you're facing off against each other, which honestly is my preferred style board game, because I really like to have me be the winner and everybody else is the losers. I'm sorry. There's just that's just the kind of games that I gravitate towards. That being said, I did still really enjoy this game. I thought it was fun. But it's hard for me to lose just in general. And if I lose to because of something that's maybe not my fault, Jeremy,
What are we trying to say here?
No, I'm just playing. When you lose in a board game like this, it's a team effort. It's not just any one person that sank the ship. As long as everybody's actually trying, which I've never had an issue with. Um, but that is why I prefer non-co-op style games, I think, if I were to have a preference.
I don't know.
Uh,
I'm starting to like this whole co-op thing. Just because then we can, figure out, you like to do literal puzzles. Well, this is kind of like a puzzle, like a mind game that we can figure out together. So I kind of like that aspect of these types of things. I will say the more and more I'm looking at Pandemic, I know when we first played this game, the Star Wars one, I was like, I don't want to touch Pandemics. I don't want this to ruin it for me. I don't know. Maybe we should try Pandemic, Sarah. There's so many expansions. It looks cool.
I do like the strategy element of it, and working together is a refreshing take on gameplay. Um
Because Sarah doesn't like co-op games. She don't play nice with people.
I have a hard time not being in control, okay? This is not new information for you, Jeremy.
Nope.
But if you are somebody like me who's a control freak and wants to be in charge of everything, co-op games are maybe not for you because you do have to let other people take charge sometimes. Because guess what? My ideas are not always the best. Even though I'd like to think so, I know they're not always the best. All right, I feel like this is getting really personal attacking on me. Um
Sorry, I'm reading some of these expansions, so if I'm making facial expressions or something that seem a little different, that's why.
No, it's all good.
Because I was
But
looking at
yeah,
one, there's one that's Pandemic Fall of Rome, and I was like, is this about the plague or something? And it looks like it's just a war game, kind of like the Clone Wars, but I don't know. Haven't played it.
this game I thought was so neat in it from a detail aspect. Even the mission markers, which are just these little tokens you put on the planets where the mission takes place, so you know what planet you have to go to, because it is a large board, so you have to make your way over there. But even those tokens, you think of a generic board game, you might think of like maybe a bingo chip, something really thin and flimsy and see through. These tokens were actually pretty heavy duty. Like they were bigger than a quarter, they were thick, like a quarter-inch thick. Plastic tokens, they had a little bit of heft to them. They were just something as simple as a plastic chip. They made sure it was high quality, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, to give a perspective, they're kind of like the size of a mint, like those circular mints that you get and you unwrap them in the plastic. They're about that size.
Yeah,
Meaning,
like a peppermint.
if you threw it at somebody, it would probably hurt.
It's true.
If your partner's not doing what they're supposed to.
Hey, pay attention.
Hey, you pay attention. There's a war going on here, Sarah, and you're over here just playing with your lightsaber.
Gotta
I
learn all
will
these
say,
cool tricks.
what?
I'm just teasing.
I didn't hear what you said.
I said I gotta learn all these cool tricks.
Oh, yeah. All these cool lightsaber twirls. The last thing I'll probably say about it is, you get to pick what Jedi you want to be. And I think Sarah said there were 7 of them. They all have their own unique abilities too. So that's pretty neat. They're not just cosmetic. They do have important things about them. So choose wisely with the character you like. Was there anything else you wanted to say about this Clone Wars game?
Um, I just really like the quality of it, but yeah, the special abilities for each character, that is an important thing to note because like my character, for example, as a free action, I was able to draw 2 cards and keep one. So it was a way for me to get a new card every round without having to take up one of my actions to do that, which is pretty nice.
And if we were on the same spot, when you discarded the card you didn't want, you could give it to me.
This is true.
So there's a little bit of extra strategy if you're on the same planet. If you're on the same planet, you can work together. Like if you're trying to do a mission or take out droids, let's say you go to do the mission and you don't have enough between your dice roll and the cards that you have in your hand. Well, if you're on the same space, then your partner can also use their cards to help you out as well. So there's a little bit of a strategy mix there too.
Yep.
But that was our discussion on the Clone Wars board game. Again, very similar probably to Pandemic, as the box itself and even throughout the rules it mentions this is like Pandemic. That's our little talk about it. So we talked about 3 different board games, card games, that we have enjoyed from Star Wars as of late. We had the deck builder game from Fantasy Flight Games. We had the villainous expansion of Scum and Villainy from Ravensburger. And then we had the Clone Wars board game from Zemon. I think it's how you pronounce it. Maybe that's the name of the company. At least that's what the Pandemic says. I don't know if you were confirming or not, because the game's right in front of you.
Oh, yes, that is who makes it. I don't know how you pronounce it. Zeman, Z-Man.
Gotcha. So if you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We typically do a Shoot the Sheev every Wednesday, so check back here for next week's. And also check out our playlist, because we've got quite a few up here. Drop us a like if you liked the video, and drop us a comment letting us know if you've played these Star Wars games before and what your thoughts are, and what other ones have you played that we haven't talked about yet, and let us know how cool they are. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.